Ladies and gentlemen, now the last part from this session in the limelight with the topic how fintech can support Indonesia's agent networks to advance financial inclusion at the last mile. In this session, we have speakers, a partner, consumer-centric CCX, digital financial expert, digital ambassador UNCDF, a co-founder Eco India Financial Services. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anna Gisherman, Ayas Mita, and Abhinav Sinha.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be part of this conference. Would like to thank the FinTech team at OJK and Patreon for inviting me to moderate this important session. Over the last few years, I've had the privilege of working with the Indonesian government, first supporting the Financial Inclusion Secretariat at Kemenko, and most recently collaborating with Ibu Nur Haida and Patreon as part of the Bellagio Working Group on Digital Financial Inclusion. The Bellagio Group brings together senior policymakers from Nigeria, Egypt, Indonesia to jointly problem-solve challenges on the way to greater digital financial inclusion in their respective countries. So the topic of today's discussion on how to leverage fintech to harness the full potential of agent banking is one of the most important discussion themes in the Bellagio Group, and we have been learning from experience in each of the three countries, as well from a number of global case studies and experts. So today we are very lucky to have two such prominent experts with us. Abhinav Sinha is a co-founder of Eco Financial Services, India's largest cash-to-digital network. And Ayas Mita is a global DFS and fintech expert, currently serving as the digital ambassador to UNCDF and acts as a senior advisor to the UN Secretary General Task Force of Digital Financial Financing of the SDGs, and also the dialogue on governance of big fintech. Okay, Ayas, that's mouthful. But before we turn to them, to the two experts, let's just kind of quickly take stock of where agent banking is in Indonesia today. And there are so many accomplishments to be proud of. Well, according to the 2019 OJK survey, more than 3/4 of the population has access to financial services. This is largely due to the successful digitization of key G2P programs, expansion of the digital payment and CRIS networks, and incredible advancement in fintech development and deployment. The agent banking infrastructure expanded tremendously as well, while occupying the agents well exceeding the 1 million mark, the number of CRIS merchants reaching almost 5 million. That's incredible. However, despite all of those successes, still 1/4 of the population doesn't have access to financial services. And the Indonesians who don't own accounts use them infrequently for a very limited number of use cases. So another set of challenges is around where the existing agents are. Most of them are not in rural areas. Many of them are barely breaking even or even operating at a loss. So the question is, how do we leverage fintech, or how can fintech help achieve kind of three things? Expanding the current footprint to advance to the last mile, expanding a range of services available to customers, and optimizing existing business models to come up with solutions that are both scalable but also profitable for both agents and providers. So to tackle this question, it's now the time to turn to Abhinav and Ayas to get some ideas, some answers from their experience in India and other markets. We will start with Abhinav and kind of Eco's unique business model that operates at two levels as a agent banking network manager, as well as a technology provider to third-party agent networks. So Abhinav, can you please tell us about Echo, kind of those two business lines, and if you can specifically focus on kind of three things. How do you build a footprint that goes beyond urban centers? Talk about kind of a broader basket of use cases to customers, and also touch on profitability kind of for agents, but also for Echo as a provider, as well as your partners, the third-party agents. So over to you, Abhinav.
Thank you so much, Anna, and good morning to everyone. Let me just set the context for all of you, especially because we are operating here in India. We've got about 1.3 billion people, and across the country there are about I think about officially there are about 18 different languages that people speak across the country. And I started Echo, which is India's largest cash to digital network serving the low and moderate income customers here in India. For the last 13 years, we've been running this network for the last 13 years. And we were confronted with this aspect of how do we grow and service 1.3 billion people in India. Now, the first part of Anna's question was, we do operate in two different models. One is we act as the agent network manager, while on the other hand, we also work as a technology provider. So, for instance, pretty much like any network agent network managers, we also have our own dashboard for agents. We have our own apps for the agent, and we typically use digital media to create awareness amongst the prospective agents across the country, and try and create awareness amongst them, and try and convert them. And thereafter, the entire conversion cycle, or whether it's about training, we more and more we are only going towards online training versus in-person training or classroom training. So we run a agent network ourselves. On the other hand, what we realized when we were scaling this network in India is that across very large geographies and across very different social structures as well as languages, it was getting very difficult for Echo to be able to scale across geographies. And one of the things that we did way back in 2015 was that we opened up our backend, and we completely transformed up our technology stack into an open API technology stack, which enabled entrepreneurs across the country who wanted to build a similar business as we were building. The open API platform gave those entrepreneurs all the tools to make their own applications and portals for agents and start acquiring agents on their own. So the acquisition of agents and scaling up of Echo's network across geographies, whether it was urban or rural, now got divided. Not only now that responsibility was not there only with Echo, but now started to get distributed amongst many entrepreneurs who wanted to participate in growing of that network. And I'm very happy to share with all of you that today Echo powers more than 300 other networks apart from powering its own network. And where we learned this, we started to look at a platform like Android. And if you look at it, Google builds Pixel smartphones on its Android platform. However, also allows thousands of other smartphone manufacturers to build their smartphone products on Android. So we've done something very similar. So we create our own dashboards for retailers, but we also empower other entrepreneurs to build their dashboards, their applications, and acquire the network on their own. So like I said, we've got a network of close to about 300,000 agents across the country in India, and this is growing spectacularly right now, whether pre-COVID, post-COVID. And we continue to acquire a lot of these entrepreneurs on a monthly basis. And I'm very happy to share that 2/3 of our transaction and 2/3 of our network today in 2020 is brought in by our partnering network, and only about 1/3 of our network is what Echo has built on its own through our own app. And the third-party network only started about 5 years ago, while we've been running Echo for the last 13 years. So you can imagine the scale that opens up as soon as open APIs are embraced, and other entrepreneurs and developers are encouraged to build an ecosystem around the platform that we've created. That's
And
really
Abhinav, can I sorry to interrupt, but an interesting point that you always make by collaborating with those third-party networks, it kind of allows for customization of the solution to their particular geographic areas. Is that the case?
Absolutely.
Kind of
Thank you so much for bringing that.
languages. Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point and so relevant to Indonesia, which also has a number of languages, ethnic groups, etc. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot for bringing that point. Absolutely, because when entrepreneurs come from different geographies, they create solutions which may be cash in and cash out, but those applications and those dashboards and those SMSs that go out to the customers are a lot more regional, a lot more culturally suited that they send as compared to what Echo would send. So I think while we do give them the tools to build the app, I think every app is different and every app is customized to an urban area of a particular geography, and it's really, really beautiful. So it has really helped in us, in our platform and the reach for financial services to really go as deep as possible.
And kind of that aspect of the business model from a profitability perspective, how do you think about kind of the agent profitability, and kind of your own the profitability of providers, because that's of course it's a challenge across the world, right? So
sure. I'm happy to share that what we see is that as far as agent level profitability is concerned, fundamentally, if there are enough products which have a reasonable demand, we do not, at least in India, we do not see agents struggling with profitability. But there are possibilities that while you are growing your network, there is a possibility that every agent does not have large enough market for them to service, for them to have enough revenues for them on a month-on-month basis. Now, I'm sure many networks are experiencing this. We experience this ourselves. Now, I personally, having worked and built a network for the last 13 years, I personally do not believe that there isn't enough demand for this service. What I think is that there isn't, in certain geographies, there isn't enough awareness about the service. As a result of which, there aren't too many walk-ins into these agents for the services that these guys provide. So I definitely want to make this distinction that if there are the banking products available and a few other products available at an agent, I do not believe that the retailer, the agents cannot make enough money for them to be profitable and sustainable on a month-on-month basis. In case there is an example where they are not making enough profit for themselves, I think it's a problem of demand generation rather than profitability of the product themselves. That's how we see this in India, and therefore it is important to kind of help them generate that amount of demand and awareness in their geographies for enough people to come and take the service. As far as profitability of agent networks like ours and our partners are concerned, what we've realized is that typically these transactions that we process at an agent do not have enough margins for the network, for the agent network managers like ourselves. And therefore, over a period of time, what we've realized is that there are two aspects to this. Keep adding relevant products for agents to sell more products. So we continue to add a portfolio of products, wherein the footfall at the agent continues to increase. Because while these transactions do not have margins, but at least an addition every time, is an add-on to everybody, whether it is to the agent or to ourselves. Secondly, which is the flavor going forward, is that it is extremely important to start to build business models around data monetization. I think it's extremely important to start to understand our agents better. It is very, very critical to start to understand the consumers better, basis their transactional behavior and a few other data points and signals which are getting generated while these transactions are happening. And I think and once we start to understand our agents and consumers far better, I think better products, whether it is to do with credit, whether it's to do with insurance, whether it's to do with savings, whether it's to do with wealth management, and I'm talking about financial services, and this can go much beyond it. If we start to understand our consumer and our agents far better using data signals that are getting generated through the transactions, I think that's where the profitability for the agent network managers on a long term will come out. I think these are early days. I think most of the agent network managers across the world uh, typically earn their margins through fee income and transactions. But I genuinely believe that the next 5 years will change the flavors from transactional fee earning to data monetization and a few other business models that will come around.
Interesting. So Abhinav, talk to us about how you've kind of expanded your portfolio of products or use cases to customers over time. And have you had that chance already to kind of monetize some of their kind of from what you're learning from kind of customer behavior, et cetera?
Sure.
But talk to us, what Echo has been around since 2014. You started working mostly with remittances, kind of basically cash in, cash out, how you've grown your portfolio today.
Sure. Again, let me just take back and share that, most of us, most of the agent network managers across the globe, we end up servicing a consumer segment, which is very large typically in our countries. And these are people who are earning and spending in cash. And the reason they are earning in cash is because they're typically employed in the non-formal economy in each of our countries, and as a result of which their wages are in cash. But because their wages are in cash doesn't mean that they don't have a smartphone, doesn't mean that they don't consume data, and doesn't mean that they don't have their needs across many different categories of products. And for instance, they may be consuming education products, they may be consuming media products, they may be consuming mobile gaming products, they may be consuming electronic books, so what I typically see is that payments are built for customers who are earning electronically like you and me, but payments are not being thought about innovatively for people who are earning in cash. And what we've done in India is that we've opened up almost every category of brands, whether it is education, whether it is mobile gaming, whether it is like ebooks, and many other non-financial services categories that we've opened up, and we've converted ourselves into a cash payment gateway. Where any customer wanting to buy or wanting to put in money into a mobile game can actually walk into an agent and put that money into the mobile game, and as soon as he switches on his game on his mobile on his smartphone, he can see his wallet on that particular mobile game topped up. He can buy an electronic book at an agent point. He can get enrolled on an online course at an agent point, and therefore what we've really thought about is that we've opened up all the categories that typically are open for you and me when it comes to online payments, and we've opened up all those categories thinking about a very large segment of people who are earning in cash in our respective countries where we run our networks. And that's how we are thinking about increasing the use cases for customers to actually walk into these agents to do the transaction. This helps in multiple ways. We get a lot of consumer insight data on what consumers are consuming in excess of financial services. These are extra use cases that agents are able to process transactions for which they are they end up earning, and these also eventually contribute to margins for networks like ours.
Excellent.
So I
And
would really encourage, I would really encourage agents across the world to actually open up their networks for brands beyond financial services. And our experience with mobile gaming, which is such a fantastically growing category, is very, very strong in India. And I would recommend that similar brands and similar categories are open for by network operators across the world.
Excellent, Abhinav. And kind of now turning to Ayaz to speak kind of from his experience from other markets and maybe some of their also countries that are kind of resemble Indonesia in terms of scale and stage of digital transformation. And you work very closely with policymakers kind of across the globe as they deliberate on how to create enabling environment for effective agent banking. Any kind of thoughts, the latest thinking, latest trends from the countries you're working with on kind of innovative business models that address this kind of last mile distribution and importantly, the scalability and profitability of the entire network?
Yeah, thanks, Anna, and thanks, Abhinav, for such an exciting discussion on your venture in India and how you're building these agent networks. I think one of the key trends that we are starting to see really happening across many geographies is countries and regulators in particular actually harnessing e-commerce platforms in a way and new business models in a way to really drive agent networks. If you look at what's happening in Indonesia, for instance, with the likes of the ride-hailing services, the Grabs, the Gojeks, but also other e-commerce platforms that are really leveraging and building last-mile agent infrastructure using their existing networks, using taxi drivers, using small retail shops and warehouses and agri-dealers, etc. This is really a new trend that is happening on a large scale. And as you said, Anna, it really depends on the level of digitalization of the economies and of the countries. So obviously, I've done quite a bit of work in China, for instance, and in China, where you have now close to 900,000 agents. What you're seeing is that it's really been advanced by e-commerce companies, by the Taobao business models and the other e-commerce platforms that have rolled out their agents across the country in almost every county and every region, every town in India, in China. And what's happening is now what the regulators are looking at is how do you actually create some kind of harmony or harmonization in the agent network between the traditional banking agents in a sense, and also the agents that have been built by all these new businesses and the e-commerce platforms, etc. And how do you reintegrate both together? And how do you create sort of a not just a level playing field, but also an infrastructure that really allows the financial sector at large, not just e-commerce companies and ride-hailing services, but also financial institutions to all together harness that infrastructure and start also harnessing all the data that is generated by that infrastructure to actually advance financial services. And so in a way, if you see the context of a very mature market like China, in a sense, what you're starting to see is a whole range of agents between e-commerce, traditional banking agents. Some of them are businesses, some of them are government outlets actually that don't have any other activity but just being agents for transactions. And what China is doing right now is that they are actually revisiting, in a sense, the existing agent banking arrangements and the existing agent regulations to understand how to make that network more interoperable, how to enhance the types of agents that can operate in the market, how to increase the level of transactions that agents can actually, or the range of transactions that create a data sharing framework and mechanism that really allows all the data generated by all of these agents to be used by all the parties involved in a country. And so this is really an attempt at, after having built out a strong agent network through alternative business models to traditional financial institutions, it's really an attempt to now create sort of the harmonization framework to really harness it. And in many ways, this experience, just like the Indonesian experience, is actually inspiring a lot of African markets where I also work, where you see more and more DFS providers and regulators and policymakers actually trying to harness the potential of e-commerce platforms and other alternative new business models in the way they harness their ecosystems, and they actually reach the last mile, particularly in rural areas, to actually advance financial inclusion. And, you know, if you go to the other end of the spectrum, taking another country that's perhaps comparable to Indonesia as well, at least in terms of size and scale, if you look at Brazil, for instance, the trajectory of Brazil has been completely different, right? They really started from agents coming from the postal service that was auctioned out to banks for banks to be able to build traditional banking agents of the postal networks. And in a sense, this has really fueled the growth of agents in Brazil. And there's probably less agents driven by new models like e-commerce, like we see in Indonesia, in Brazil, because of the trajectory that they have been following. But now this is going to happen with the new instant payment systems and other developments in the market that are really going to allow new business models to emerge, faster transactions, and new types of agents to participate as well. And so what I am trying to say here is that you really see a very broad spectrum. And Indonesia obviously is one of the very advanced countries and advanced markets on that spectrum. But if we look at the experience from China, and maybe I will pause here, and I know I'm struggling a little bit with my connection this morning. It's early here. I apologize if my voice breaks up a little bit. But you know, if we see the lessons from China, what we can really see is that in a highly digitalized economy, where a lot of the transactions now are really digital. So once the customers have passed the hurdle of cash in, cash out, they're now in a digital space and mostly transacting digitally. The question of agent sustainability becomes a very important question. The question of the agent business model and profitability becomes a very important question. The question of how do you enable a layer of agent managers and agent network managers to increase the operational efficiency of your agents when the revenue generated is already sort of very limited in a sense, because most transactions are digital, becomes an issue. And so what China is really now grappling with is a lot of these questions around how do we introduce additional layers in the management of the agent networks? How do we review the commission structure? How do we review the range of transactions to make it much more profitable and much more sustainable in a sense? And these are sort of the type of new frontier questions that emerge once you've reached that level of maturity and once you've established such a broad agent network, right, in a sense that's already covering your entire country.
I think another
Over to you, Anna.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ayaz. And I think another, I mean, you've mentioned a number of kind of important questions that come up as, you know, kind of the ecosystem evolves and new innovative models emerge. And kind of the question that comes up often when you discuss agent banking in Indonesia or elsewhere, what about risk management? How do we ensure that we don't overlook issues as important as consumer protection or financial system risk? So how do you think about risk management in this context as those kind of like new models are evolving so rapidly? Maybe we'll start with you, Ayaz, and then turn to Abhinav, how he thinks about it as he is building Echo and collaborating with others. Over to you. Maybe Ayaz.
Yeah, so it's really a question. Thank you, Anna. So it's really a question of trade-off, and how do you want to manage the trade-off? If you look at the traditional risks related to agent networks, they will be mostly around consumer protection, as you mentioned, but also market power in a sense. And particularly as we see a platformification of the economy, if you would like, and big platforms emerging that roll out agent networks, obviously, given their scale and size, they might be monopolizing the infrastructure in terms of agents. This is pretty much what happened in China, by the way, where I think the e-commerce platforms and the Taobao model in particular has really established a dominant position as it relates to the agent network. And so the reaction of the regulator was to say, great, but all the data that is generated in that agent network in terms of transactions has to be made available to all the participants in the financial sector in a sense. And so they have brought this back into the formal financial system by making that data available to banks and financial institutions and by sharing it more largely. I think it's really a question of where do you want to draw the line and which kind of trade-offs as a regulator or as a policymaker you're actually willing to make, because you need to manage sort of system risk in a sense, and you need to manage also the infrastructure risk in a sense, and you also need to drive financial inclusion. And so really the question is, how do you manage those trade-offs, and how do you build a test and learn approach? Because if you are becoming very strict in the way you regulate agents, there's a number of things that you're not going to be allowing. There's innovative business models like roaming agents that can actually provide doorstep services, door to door, and really in remote rural areas or in islands. You know, you see a lot of boats being agents being on a boat and navigating from one island to the next and providing doorstep services. All these interesting models are extremely helpful in driving inclusion of different segments of the population and different pockets in different geographies. And really the question is then, how do you manage the risks related to or brought by these new models while also allowing innovation to happen and fintech innovation to happen of the likes of Echo in India? And I think this is where you see different responses from different jurisdictions. As I said, in China, the regulator really stepped in and said, we need all of that data to be shared with the entire ecosystem. There's other markets where regulators actually require specific types of agents to be in fixed locations, formal businesses, have different types of licenses and have a certain level of infrastructure available, which is good in terms of consumer protection, but also in many ways limits the penetration and the reach of these agents because of the constraints. And so that might work for urban, semi-urban areas, but much less for remote rural areas in a sense. And so really what's emerging as an approach is first to have a risk-based approach to regulating those agents, and also really enable and implement a test and learn approach with sandboxing, with RegTech and SupTech, with tools that allow regulators to test different type of business models, different type of agents, and be able to actually measure what's really the risk profile and what's the level of risk of that type of agent, and how do I then adopt a service-based regulatory approach as opposed to sort of a type of agent base. So you really look at the services offered by agents, and obviously an agent that only offers bill payment will be presenting much less risk than an agent that allows cash in, for instance. And so in many ways, one might think about enabling a lot of doorstep services, mobile agents, innovative models for specific types of services that are lower risk, and maybe have a bit more control over agents that are higher risk because of the nature of their activity. And I think because of and I will stop with this, because of the proliferation of new business models, because FMCG companies are also digitalizing their businesses and potentially rolling out a lot of agents, I think we have the potential to use all these fintech developments and all these new agents to really significantly expand outreach and footprint. And so the question for me is not necessarily to stop that innovation, but really to manage it in a way on a service-based, risk-based approach, and adopting a test and learn approach to defining regulations. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, IS. And I was just informed that, I mean, this is such an interesting conversation, but we very quickly ran out of time. I apologize, because I just really wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper also on some of the risk management approaches in India, and speak of some of the kind of the lessons you highlighted from other markets and its applicability in Indonesia. But I think we've gotten a lot, kind of a glimpse of what's happening around the world. Interesting models of how agent banking is kind of pushing the frontier, but also by fintech building this kind of more extensive agent banking models, but also being, as Abhinav put it in one of our conversations, also kind of empowering the ecosystem, being the tech provider to the existing to the existing network. So I think there are a number of lessons there to be taken into account for as kind of Indonesian stakeholders, the regulators, as well as industry players, are thinking the way forward of multiple types of agents kind of coexisting and advancing the frontier and ensuring that in a few years, by 2024, most of Indonesians would have access to financial services. So thank you so much, Abhinav and Ayaz, for this kind of, I think, beginning of this conversation, but I think a lot of wonderful kind of thoughts and guidance already came up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all speakers for a very, very exciting discussion on fintech today. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the session in the limelight, how fintech can support Indonesia's agent networks to advance financial inclusion at the last mile, marks the end of the official closing ceremony of Indonesia Fintech Summit 2020 and Pekan Fintech Nasional 2020 virtual event. We thank His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia, for officiating this important event. Thank you as well to their Excellencies, Deputy Senior Governor of Bank Indonesia, Vice Chairman of OJK, all panelists and moderators, to all our virtual guests from Indonesia and around the world.